In the last video on my channel, I was discussing the impact of Gerald Genter's designs on the Swiss watchmaking industry, documenting how his work helped to save several big brands from the quartz crisis. The thing I didn't mention in that video is while brands survived by conveying the message that there is value in the quality of finishing, craftsmanship and old-fashioned watchmaking in the form of handmade mechanical and automatic movements, I think they might have conveyed the message a little too well, as for decades now it's meant that quartz pieces are often overlooked or derided by aficionados. It's true that there are mass-produced, utterly garbage quartz pieces out there who are easy to point to as evidence for the movement's inferiority. But it's also true that there are exceptional quartz watches out there which are more affordable and accurate because of the quartz movements that they utilize. I'm a firm believer that every collection needs a quartz piece in it, and I've followed a set of basic rules in this video to uncover what I believe to be the 10 best quartz models available for less than $1,000. First and foremost, it has to have some form of quartz movement inside with an analog display. I already have a digital only video featured on my channel if you're wondering why I'm excluding them. Secondly, and unsurprisingly given what I've just mentioned, it has to be available for under $1,000. Some models featured are second-hand prices, and I will flag that up where it applies. Finally, for the sake of variety, each brand can only feature on the list once. With all that said, let's get into the video. I reviewed this model just over a month ago, and it's left a lasting impression on me. I really enjoyed the looks, dimensions and wearing experience with the Expedition Camper. I wasn't expecting to enjoy a budget piece quite so much. If you're looking for a basic, does-the-job timepiece that looks great on a budget, I think this, with a smarter strap option as a potential swap-in backup, is a great choice. If you like the look but want an upgraded version, the Expedition Sierra is a good shout, but it is popular and relatively difficult to get hold of now, especially the smaller 40mm version. If you think of the quality of a watch as a combination of materials, design, finishing and movement, what you then really need to make a purchasing decision is the context of the price. Is this a good watch for the money? Does it punch above its weight? Or am I getting ripped off? Well, the SN0116 range has stainless steel construction, AR coated sapphire crystal, original design with interesting colorways, finishing you wouldn't turn your nose up at for 3 to 4 times the price, and a Seiko movement. You might scoff at the brand for its Far Eastern origins, but trust me on this, if you haven't heard of them before, you're the one missing out. The Field Medic 2 has a lot going for it. The titanium case means it's lightweight. The 10 available colorways for the dial give you choice, and the Seiko Instruments VK64 Mecha Quartz movement gives the chronograph hand a smooth sweep around the dial. When these launched a few years ago, before inflation hit everything hard, you could occasionally find them in the sale window below $200. While I think it's unlikely to find that price point anymore, I still think the value proposition is there, especially when you get the model in hand and can fully appreciate its build quality. As one of the 2 core strengths of quartz movements is their accuracy, while researching this list, I spent time looking at exactly what the most pinpoint timekeepers were for below the budget. Then I remembered my experience with the Oceanus T200, and while I will still pick out a standalone piece with a very accurate movement for the list, I have to say, I think this will beat it. The justification is simple. The T200 can be set up to update its time based on the atomic clock signal every day at midnight. You can also prompt the watch to do this manually whenever you want, and it can be set up to stay perfectly in sync through the Casio app. This constant time monitoring and adjustment makes it pretty difficult to beat in terms of deviation in accuracy. Initially, I wanted to feature the Lunar Pilot here instead of the Super Seville, as this piece was also in my list last week on 1970s inspired sports watches. The thing is, despite its storied history, even the new smaller version of the Lunar Pilot is still going to be far too big for most people to make for a particularly helpful recommendation. And I think it's important to have the Precisionist 262 kHz movement featured here. One big argument commonly made against quartz pieces is disdain for the ticking second hand. Well, no such issue here. The Precisionist movement offers a sweeping second hand on the Super Seville, in the same way that you might see a Mecha Quartz movement used to achieve the same thing with chronograph hands. I've grown very fond of this piece, and it's definitely on my hit list for the future. I think the Citizen Zenshin might just be the best all-around package on the list. It features an eco-drive movement powered by light and has an absolutely beautiful sports watch aesthetic, with plenty of surfaces to show off the mixture of brushed and polished finishes applied to the titanium case and bracelet. On top of that, the dial has a mottled texture to it that really helps the coloration come to life. You also get day-date functionality on the dial at 3 o'clock, all wrapped up into a wearable 39mm diameter and less than 10mm thick. A really nice watch. I have always thought that the Tissot Seastar range suffered from the lugs being too abrupt and the piece looking like a basic circle as a result. The newer variants don't suffer from this issue, and while the looks are hardly what you'd call original, there are some nice unique touches like the T second hand and indeed the smaller sizing. The truth is, if you've got a smaller wrist or simply prefer the experience of a smaller timepiece, the options for dive models is actually pretty limited. There is a 40mm version if you like this style but not the size, but I do think that the print work isn't quite as good on that one. Something slightly off about the white space. I really wanted to feature a micro brand on the list and was determined to find one that I hadn't heard of before, offering something truly unique. That took me a while. I do spend quite a lot of time researching watches after all, but eventually I found something that really stood out to me, and given that a lot of the information for the piece only appears to be available in French, its obscurity from my previous searches is perhaps understandable. The Horloscaphe NC003 Fluide, for want of a better way of describing it, has been hydro-modded in-house. It features an air bubble that will move around the dial, changing size based on the temperature and pressure it is exposed to. A really nice no-nonsense tool diver. As part of my professional life, I spend a fair amount of time training and giving advice to people in their early 20s, and invariably they own Tag Heuers. They see the brand as a stepping stone of prestige on their way to a Rolex when they've finally made it. I don't want to generalize too much, but the movement doesn't really seem to matter to too many of them. It's just the brand label. The thing is, if you aren't into watches, and even if you are, I don't see anything too wrong with this approach. And I actually think the Aquaracer is a really handsome timepiece. It boasts excellent build quality and ETA movement, Swiss made on the dial, and given the demand from burgeoning professionals on a budget, the resale if you do want to trade up is pretty good too. I was able to find one brand new at $900, but I've got to be honest, I'm not sure how common that is. It can definitely still feature on this list though, as second-hand models are well below the $1,000 mark. This model first released back in 2011, and customers can often be put off by having both the Seiko and Grand Seiko logos on the dial. It's definitely something they've moved away from over the past decade, and indeed entirely since the split. I mentioned earlier my desire to feature the most accurate standalone quartz movement under $1,000, and if this isn't it, with its thermocompensated hand-assembled 9F62 movement with the deviation of plus or minus 10 seconds a year, then I'm pretty sure I'm still safe, as the precisionist movement from Bulova has also already featured. As an aside, while I've focused on discussing the movement here, this is also a beautifully finished model with a gorgeous champagne dial. So there we have it, what I consider to be the 10 best analog display quartz watches available for less than $1,000. As with any of these lists, I love to hear your thoughts, experiences, questions and input into the discussion around my choices. As an aside though, I am getting really annoyed with my audio. The last video was a tragedy in terms of sound quality that I couldn't seem to fix. I've thrown the kitchen sink at this one to see if I can make it sound better. If you're a long-term viewer, let me know if it's an improvement. If not, I'll have to spend next month's watch budget on a new microphone. As ever, thank you for your time. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, consider dropping the video a like and subscribing for more content like this in future.